can't see you. We need to turn your camera on.
It's okay, Frankie. It's off on purpose.
Why's that? You okay?
Not presentable. Makeup's run. Been crying. Been laughing. I'm a bit angry now, actually.
Oh, really? What's happened now?
Bloody Tedward. What else?
Oh, I should have guessed. What happened? Turn your camera on.
I can't. Not yet. In a minute.
So, tell me what happened.
Mum was saying about how fed up she was with Edward, with all the door painting back and forth.
And?
Izzy came round earlier, bless her. She brought a tin of green paint with her, said she was going to fix up her dad's door. I thought that was sweet of her. She does think of me. Sometimes.
So I'd had enough of it all and went round to fix Dad's door to get rid of that bloody navy blue paint Ted's so fond of. And I was only halfway through when Edward turned up with a pot of red.
King to C3.
Goodness.
And I know last time we spoke up, I wasn't very kind to him.
I did hear.
From Mum?
Yeah.
Hi, Dad. I was around Nan's and did you hear what happened? You did. Aunt Izzy was there with Edward and both were trying to paint the front door different colours at the same time. What a mess.
Goodness gracious, Sal. Izzy was standing on the kitchen chair, painting the door green from the top down, when Edward turned up, also with paint. I'd forgotten he was coming. Anyway, and without a word, mind you, he opened his pot and started painting the door from the bottom up. In red, of course.
Queen to A1.
King to D2.
Izzy was flinging her paintbrush wildly about, shouting and swearing down at him, as only she can, telling him that she was painting the door for her dad and he should just go away. Well, she didn't say go away, of course, but I don't use that sort of language myself. Edward just kept his head down while he was being splattered with paint, painting the door from the bottom as though he was possessed or something.
I was already started on the door when Edward, well, he just started painting it from the bottom up and I kept telling him to pee off. Well, not pee exactly. I may have lost it a little bit, to be honest, and accidentally on purpose dripped paint on him. And no, before you ask, I had not been drinking.
I really did not know what to do. I kept telling them to stop, but they wouldn't listen to me, as usual. So I went inside to make a pot of tea. I only had Meadows in, unfortunately.
Oh, and then Dad, after Nan went back into the garden to go back inside, only Ted went and arrived.
Oh, my God, Izzy. So, what happened then?
Well, I didn't see him arrive at first, and Edward had started flicking paint back up at me by then, the immature sod. Anyway, the first thing I knew, Ted was there when Edward and I were absolutely covered in blue paint.
Queen to B2. Check.
King to D1.
He only went and threw a can of paint over them both.
You sure you're okay? Turn your camera on.
Well, I'm okay now, of course. But at the time, I was in a complete state of shock, standing there, the back of my legs covered in blue paint, green all over my hands and sleeves. I've always been a messy painter, and then also splotches of red up my front from Edward flicking it up at me. Edward got it worse. I'm not sure, but I think Ted was aiming mainly at him because he ended up covered in blue paint from head to foot, all over, in his hair, everywhere.
And then Edward stood up, slow-like, and what was the name of that film, Dad? The one with the girl, the one where she's all covered in blood.
Carrie. It was like a scene from that film, Carrie, only in blue. I came out carrying my tray of tea, and the whole scene had descended into a horror show.
Oh, I quite like that film, actually. It's one of my favourites.
Ted had arrived and was holding an empty pot of blue paint dripping all over my footpath. Izzy was still on the chair, and Edward, he was just standing there looking very angry. Well, I think he was angry, It was hard to tell under all that blue paint.
Bishop to F1.
Anyway, it doesn't matter what film it was, because Edward, he just lost it, Dad. He went well ballistic and stormed towards Ted and went and only tipped the rest of the red paint all over his head.
Rook to D2.
And then they started shouting at each other, calling each other names, scooping handfuls of paint out of their tins and flinging it at each other.
Rook to D7.
Rook to D7.
And Frankie, it was nothing to do with Mum at all. None of it was. It was all about some chess tournament or something way back when.
Bishop to C4.
Pawn to C4.
And Ted was accusing Edward of cheating or something. And I was so furious at them both, especially after all this trouble. And I was really upset about Dad's door, Frankie. It was ruined, all covered in red and blue and green paint. I was so angry.
Queen to H8.
Rook to D3.
Dad, you wouldn't believe it, but Aunt Easy, she just jumped down from her chair and went and poured all her paint all over them both.
And I just couldn't help myself. I just pitched in.
Izzy, please, are you sure you're okay? Turn your camera on right now.
All right.
You're covered in paint. Your hair, your face. Oh, for God's sake. Well, what happened then?
Well, we had a paint fight.
All three of them, Sal, including Izzy, were throwing paint all over each other in great messy handfuls, throwing it like a big glossy rainbow. Well, the garden was a complete mess.
Queen to A8.
Pawn to C3.
Out of the three of them, Dad, I would have to say Ted was the one with the most skill at paint throwing. He must have done it before. He was just too accurate.
Queen to A4 check.
King to E1.
Oh, it was a nightmare, Frankie. There was paint flying everywhere. I couldn't stop myself. And then I caught a glint in Ted's eye, and I'm not sure what it was, but in that moment, we both knew the whole thing was bloody ridiculous.
Pawn to F4.
Pawn to F5.
The neighbours were all out by then. That nosy curtain twitcher from number 46 as well. Oh, she won't tire of gossiping about this one for a very long time, I can tell you.
It was crazy, Dad. Aunt Izzy and Ted, they just burst out laughing, and for no reason. And then they turned on Edward and pelted him bad, Dad, and laughing all the time. They were laughing like maniacs.
King to C1.
Rook to D2.
You know, Sal, it's a rare sight to see either of those two laugh. And when they turned on Edward, well, I couldn't help laughing myself. He was still so angry and shouting, and he looked so shocked. And when he turned to me for help, well, I had to put the tray down. I was laughing so much. And then he just ran off down the road, with Ted shouting after him something like, even the laziest king flees wildly in the face of a double check. Aaron Sinomovich. I had to look it up.
Queen to A7.
Black resigns.
Check and bloody mate at last, you chess-cheating charlatan.
Oh, and then the dog walker arrived.